One of the biggest mistakes that I feel like barbers make is that whenever they go to create their guidelines, they don't really make them as defined as possible. And one of the biggest things that I really want you to see from this video is pay attention to how defined and visible I'm making each and every guideline. Because it's so easy to start a fade, and then in the middle of it, you just completely get lost and don't even know where you're at. The way I'm going to be doing this fade is by taking one section at a time. So right now I'm creating my first initial guideline, which is going to be the foundation line for the whole haircut that we're about to do. And this is going to be more of a burst fade, not really a mohawk. Because if I did a mohawk, then it would be a lot more narrow. Now that I created that first line, I'm going to take my shaver and I'm going to really start taking it all the way down to skin. And of course, for the majority of the time, I'm going to be using the part that has both blades on the shaver. That way I can cover a bigger area in less time. So in order to be able to create a defined line, but at the same time be able to take it out, I'm going to stop about a 1/4 inch away from the line that I created with my shaver. And once I stop right there, I'm going to flip my shaver over. And this time, I'm going to start right at the line that I created with the trimmer, place my shaver on it, and this time just work down. And by doing that, it literally just erases a shaver line for me. So now I don't even have to worry about taking this line out. And just to really make sure, let me go in one more time, going down with the grain. Okay, now that the bottom foundation part is out the way, let's move on to our next guideline. So now I'm going to be taking my clipper and opening the lever all the way. So now making my next section, I'm only going to be using that much of the blade now. That way I can really create the curved shape that I'm really wanting to create. I'm going to follow the same guideline that I made at the beginning, following the same shape. And once again, pay attention to how defined I'm making this line. I'm making the line as defined as possible. That way I know the exact area that I'm going to be continuing to work in. And as I'm fading out this line, I'm going to be using the lever and the notches on the lever to really determine how close I get to the line. And as I continue to work up within that section, I'm going to be opening it one notch at a time until my lever is all the way open again. And essentially, that's what I use to be able to create this line. So beginning with the lever all the way closed, let's go ahead and work in a small section first. And literally, once again, I'm only going to be using the corner of the blade to work in a small area. That way I can ensure myself not to push up the fade too high. One notch, I'm going to be working my way up a 1/4 inch higher within that same section. And of course, this will not erase the bottom line completely. All this is doing is creating gradiency within this section and softening up the bottom line. One of the biggest misconceptions about fading is that you're supposed to create lines and erase those lines. But in reality, what you're trying to do is create lines and sections and create gradiency. So basically you're creating a fade within each section to really be able to give the whole thing gradiency. Okay, now that I created gradiency within this section, we still have a little bit of a distinct line at the very bottom, of course. I'm going to use a trimmer to really eliminate that line completely. And once again, I'm not going to use the full blade. I'm only going to use a corner of the blade to really work in a small area and go in between each individual hair to really eliminate that bottom line. If you happen to use a full blade, then you're going to run the risk of pushing the fade up even higher. Notice how that line is really starting to come out now. And if you need to, you can go up a little bit higher within that section, but the higher that you go within that section, make sure you start tilting your clipper outwards a lot more. There's still a little distinct line right there, right? Just a little bit. So I'm just going to go back in. Same thing, I'm not going to go up against the grain. I'm going to go with the grain, just in that one specific area. And that should smoothen that first initial line out. So now I'm going to continue working with sections this wide all throughout the back. Now with the bottom section completely faded out, there's still a little bit of imperfections throughout the whole thing, but I'm not going to focus on them too much. I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next section, and at the very end, we'll come back and detail the whole thing one more time. Now for the next section, I'm going to use a number 1 guard with the lever all the way open again, going about 1/2 inch above the last section that we already faded out. And this is literally the same process all over again, using the corner of the blade to really create the curve shape that we're going for. I have my clipper out in this angle. I have it digging in on the beveled edge to really be able to get close and make a defined line. Now with the line created, we know we went with the number 1 and we ended off with the 0 down here. So literally, in order to take out this line right in between, I'm going to be using the 0.5 guard or the 1/2 guard, and once again using the corner of the blade to really dig in. Notice how in this area I was using this side of the blade, but the moment I get towards the back, I switch out my clipper and use the opposite side of the blade in order for it to be more comfortable for me and be able to reach a different angle without putting my body in a weird position. It's really starting to erase for me, but it still left a little distinct line. So just real quick, let's go ahead and take the 1/2 guard off and open the lever all the way. And the lever open all the way is essentially equivalent to the 1/2 guard. Of course, with it not having a guard on it, it is going to be cutting a lot closer, but it's not going to cut too close to where it leaves a patch. So now moving up near the Parado ridge, this might be our last section that we create, and I'm going to be creating that with the number 2 guard with the lever all the way open once again. Now at this point, this is where my lines are going to be a little bit more softer. I'm really not going to be digging in because I don't want to leave too much of a defined line above the Parado ridge. I want to start blending into it. And the way that I'm going to be able to achieve that, I'm simply going to be going off the head, allowing the Parado ridge to really guide my clippers off, and that way I can start blending into this top area. And same thing towards the back. Towards the back, just going straight off the head. Now that we're done with the number 2, going off the head, I went ahead and closed it up. That way I can just come right on the line again and kind of soften it up a little bit more in order to prep it for the 1.5 guard. And the 1.5 did a really good job of softening up the line again. So now with the number 1, I'm going to open the lever all the way, and essentially that's going to be equivalent to a 1.5 guard as well. And once again, since it's actually a number 1 guard, it's going to be cutting a little bit lower than the actual 1.5. This one kind of just offsets it. Now that the edge up is in place, we can really begin to see each and every imperfection. So one of the main areas that I'm looking at right now would be towards the back. Notice how the back is way darker than the front is. So right now that I'm detailing, I'm simply going to go back in and pretty much repeat the steps, but this time I'm really going to be going at an angle to really ensure that I don't end up pushing and cutting in the area that I don't want to cut. So within this area, I'm going to begin with no guard. Then once I get to this area, I'm going to probably end up with the number 1 to really be able to line that up and make it match to the front. Then once this area is detailed, I'm going to begin detailing the front, which I can see that there's a little line right here. But once we eliminate some of the darkness from back here, we're really going to be able to see that that's going to eliminate a lot of the darkness from the front as well, because you're going to be taking away the contrast. And just like that, we were able to erase each individual line by itself. And notice how in the back, we still got a little bit of darkness near the crown area, but I really didn't want to dig in and take that out because then everything would just look off and look more like a mohawk.
You can take a look at it, and if you're...
Awesome, sounds good. Well, thank you so much. Yo, I just got on the phone with Boogsy.